She had the carrier in the car, she had the shelter's number saved in her phone, she had told herself 3 separate times on 3 separate mornings that today was the day, that it wasn't working, that she had tried, that a 130-pound Cane Corso with a trauma history was simply too much for a woman living alone in a 2-bedroom house in Memphis, Tennessee, and that the kindest thing she could do for both of them was admit it. She was sitting on the kitchen floor at 7:14 a.m. on a Wednesday, keys in hand, ready to make the call. And then Apollo did something that made her put the keys down. She has never picked them up for that reason again. Elena Voss was 36 years old and had spent the better part of 2 years building a life back from a point she still didn't have a clean word for. Not a breakdown, not a crisis, just a slow, quiet erosion. A career she had given 12 years to that ended without ceremony, a relationship that dissolved in the particular way long things do, gradually and then all at once. By January, she was living alone in Memphis with a savings account she was drawing down carefully and a therapist she saw on Thursdays who kept using the phrase forward motion. She was making forward motion, slowly. On good days, it felt like progress. On hard days, it felt like dragging something heavy across carpet. She had not planned on a dog. She had specifically, deliberately, consciously decided that a dog was the one thing she did not have the capacity for right now. Then her therapist mentioned it, not as an assignment, just a thought, offered carefully at the end of a Thursday session. Sometimes external structure helps, a reason to get up at a consistent time, something that needs you before you've decided how you feel about the day. Elena said she would think about it. She did not think about it. She drove directly to the Midtown Animal Shelter on Summer Avenue and asked to see the dogs available for adoption. The shelter coordinator, a man named Curtis, walked her through the kennels. 31 dogs. She looked at all of them. She was almost at the end of the row when Curtis said, "This one has been here the longest. I want to be upfront with you about his history." The kennel at the far end was larger than the others. Inside it, pressed against the back wall, sat a 130-pound black Cane Corso with a white patch on his chest and eyes that looked like they had been through something specific and survived it without becoming angry about it. His name on the intake card was Apollo. He had been surrendered 11 months ago by his original owner, a man who had purchased him as a protection dog, kept him in an outdoor kennel with minimal human contact for 18 months, and then surrendered him when he moved apartments. "He is not aggressive," Curtis said. "He has never shown aggression toward people. He has no bite history, no territorial behavior, no resource guarding. But he doesn't respond to affection. He doesn't come to the front of the kennel when people approach. He doesn't engage. He has been here 11 months, and in that time he has shown no behavioral improvement and no behavioral decline. He simply exists." 3 families took him home on trial and brought him back within 2 weeks. The first said they couldn't reach him. The second said it felt wrong, like something was permanently off. The third said he was like living with a ghost. "He's on our long stay list. I need you to know that before you make any decision." Elena looked at Apollo. Apollo looked at the wall. She thought about the phrase, like living with a ghost. She thought about the last 2 years. She thought about dragging something heavy across carpet on the hard days. She said, "I'll take him." Curtis blinked. He said, "You want to take him today?" Elena said, "Yes." The first 3 weeks were exactly what Curtis had described. Apollo existed in the house the way a piece of furniture exists, present, taking up space, requiring maintenance, offering nothing back. He ate when food was placed in front of him. He went outside when the back door opened. He slept in the corner of the living room with his back to the room, facing the wall. Elena had expected hard. She had not expected invisible. She sat near him every evening without touching him, not reaching out, not speaking, just occupying the same room. She had read that with severely withdrawn dogs, sometimes proximity without demand was the only language that worked. She didn't know if it was working. She kept doing it anyway. By week 4, Apollo had moved his sleeping position 6 inches away from the wall. Elena noticed. She didn't say anything about it. By week 6, he was sleeping in the center of the room. By week 7, he had stopped flinching when Elena moved past him quickly. Small things, the kind of things you could dismiss if you were looking for dramatic evidence of progress. Elena had stopped looking for dramatic evidence. She was watching for the small things now. The 6 inches away from the wall, the flinch that stopped happening, the way his ears had started tracking her movements around the house rather than remaining fixed forward and away. But the mornings were still bad. Apollo wouldn't come to her in the mornings. He'd turn away when she approached before 9 a.m. He ate facing the corner. He carried himself through the first hours of each day with the deliberate distance of something that had learned that mornings ended badly and hadn't yet been shown evidence to the contrary. Elena understood this more than she wanted to admit. Then week 8 arrived, and with it, 3 bad days in a row. I see you're still here but haven't subscribed yet. That honestly stings a little. Hit that subscribe button right now. You need to be here for what comes next. Elena had a week in February where everything that had been quiet for 2 months got loud again all at once, the way things do when you have been managing them carefully and then your grip slips. It started with an email on Monday from a former colleague forwarding a job listing at her old company, the position she had built for 6 years before it was eliminated in a restructuring that was described in the official communication as a strategic realignment. She had not opened that email for 3 days. When she finally did on Wednesday morning, it took her back to the afternoon she had sat in a conference room and been told, in careful language, that her role no longer existed. She had held it together in the room, she had made it to her car, she had not held it together in the car. On top of the email, there had been a phone call with her mother on Tuesday evening that went the way those calls sometimes went, beginning with concerned, moving through suggestion, and arriving at the particular silence that meant her mother was doing the math on Elena's life and finding it wanting. Elena had said she was fine. Her mother had said, "Of course you are," in the tone that meant the opposite. 2 nights of no sleep, followed by a third that wasn't much better. By Wednesday morning, she was running on nothing, the kind of nothing that makes the smallest tasks feel architectural. She sat down on the kitchen floor at 7:14 a.m. and looked at the carrier she had never returned to the shelter after Apollo's intake. She had the shelter number in her phone. She thought, "I gave this 8 weeks. I sat next to him every night. I read about withdrawn dogs and proximity without demand, and I tried all of it. And I am tired, and I have nothing left, and I cannot pour from an empty cup," which is something her therapist had said and which she had written in her notebook, and which had felt true until this moment, when it felt like a reason to quit. She picked up her keys, she looked at the carrier, she thought, "I gave this 8 weeks. I sat next to him every night. I read about withdrawn dogs and proximity without demand, and I tried all of it. And I am tired, and I have nothing left, and I cannot pour from an empty cup," which is something her therapist had said and which she had written in her notebook, and which had felt true until this moment, when it felt like a reason to quit. Apollo, who had been in the living room facing the wall the way he always faced it in the mornings, walked into the kitchen. She heard him before she saw him, the slow, deliberate sound of 130 pounds crossing hardwood. He didn't stop at the food bowl. He didn't go to the back door. He walked directly to Elena, sat down in front of her, and placed his enormous head in her lap. All 130 pounds of him. Head down, completely still, chin resting on her knees, eyes closed. He had never done this before. Not once in 8 weeks. Elena sat there for a long time. Her hand moved without her deciding to move it, settling on the back of his neck, feeling the warmth of him, the weight of his head, the slow rise and fall of his breathing. She put the keys on the floor beside her. She did not pick them up. What happened after that was not sudden or dramatic. It was slow, the way real things are slow. Apollo started coming to her in the mornings. Not immediately. First, it was once a week, then 3 times, then every day. He stopped turning away before 9 a.m. He started meeting her at the bedroom door when she woke up, not demanding anything, just present, the way he had been present on the kitchen floor on that Wednesday morning. Simply there, weight and warmth and breath. A reminder that another living thing had decided she was worth sitting next to. Elena's therapist asked about forward motion on the next Thursday. Elena said, "I think something shifted." The therapist asked her to describe it. Elena was quiet for a moment. She said, "You know how some mornings it feels like getting out of bed is the whole accomplishment?" The therapist said yes. Elena said, "I don't feel that way anymore." Not because the hard things went away, but because something is waiting at the door, and it turns out that's enough. The therapist asked what changed. Elena thought about it. She said, "I stopped being the only one showing up." Today, Apollo is 2 years old. He sleeps in the center of the living room, no longer facing the wall. He meets Elena at the bedroom door every morning at 7 a.m. He places his head in her lap on the kitchen floor when the days get heavy. Not every time, but often enough that Elena has stopped being surprised by it and started being grateful instead. Curtis from the shelter stopped by once 6 months after the adoption to drop off some paperwork. He stood in the doorway and watched Apollo lying across Elena's feet on the couch, completely relaxed, eyes half closed. He said, "I wouldn't have recognized him." Elena looked down at the 130-pound dog occupying most of her couch and approximately half of her heart. She said, "Me neither," about both of us. Elena kept a notebook during those first 8 weeks. Not a journal, just a record of small things. The 6 inches away from the wall, the flinch that stopped. On the Wednesday she almost made the call, she had written, "I don't think this is working." On the Thursday after, she had written only, "He came to me." Some broken things don't need to be fixed. They need someone stubborn enough to sit near them until they remember what they are. That's not nothing. That's everything. If you were in Elena's position that Wednesday morning, keys in hand, carrier in the car, would you have stayed or would you have made the call? Tell me in the comments.